So, I filmed this once already, and did I turn my mic on? No, I clipped it on, did not turn it on. Yeah, I'm not very impressed with myself there. Went to start editing, and guess what? No sound, because I put my mic on, I put the receiver into the phone, and I didn't turn it on. Let's just make sure the sucker's on. Okay, green light. So, hopefully that doesn't happen again. Yes, Sophie, not very impressed with, Mama is not very impressed with herself. So the other day, just last week, I was making a note in my journal here that says, in a field of roses, be a wildflower, which I think is an awesome philosophy to live your life as. I noticed, I just was flipping back, and I found my list, my checklist that I had built for getting the house, the tiny house, ready to move from its original spot in Calgary, Alberta, to Vancouver Island, British Columbia. And that happened in September of 2022. So I thought that this is probably something that could be very useful to those of you out there who are getting your tiny houses ready to move. You've never moved them before, and you're a little overwhelmed with all of the things that you need to get done. Yes, I'm wearing black, and Sophie is going to make sure I am totally covered in white fur by the time we're done. So lint rollers are for. So I thought what I would do today is go over my checklist. Now, this is not an exhaustive checklist. This is just my checklist. I'm a total geek and a total list nerd, and I find if I write it down, then I can keep track of it. I don't want to have to trust to my memory for anything. I prefer to have notes. I can refer back. I can remember. In here, I note everything, who I talked to, when I did it, if I got a quote on price, all of those things. And this little book, this little notebook came with me everywhere for a couple of months prior to our move and afterwards. And this checklist was also invaluable when I was moving from my first spot on the island to the spot I'm in now. So I thought this would be a useful thing. Hopefully it's useful to some of you out there, because this was invaluable for me. So let's get started with my checklist of 12 things. Well, I don't have 12. I don't have 12 fingers. Of the 12 things that are on my checklist that might actually help you to get yourself ready and your tiny house ready. The first thing, and the most important thing of this whole thing, you need to book your mover. Now, I always recommend, unless you are a truck driver, a transport driver, an experienced mover, I recommend that you hire a professional. This is your home. This is your, your life that you're moving, and you want to make sure that you've hired somebody who's a professional and knows what they're doing. So I got a name. The fellow that moved my tiny house from Lethbridge, from the builder, to Calgary, I got his name from my builder, and then I did some research online, and I looked on some Facebook groups, tiny house Facebook groups, and I got two other names. I ended up using a company called A&N Transport, Andrew Southam and his wife Noemi, and they're the movers that moved me to Vancouver Island and then moved me from that first spot over here. I love them. There's other good movers out there. They were amazing for me. But I think it's important that you obviously find your mover, talk to some people that have used them, and just look online at reviews and things like that. And make sure that they come out and look at your tiny house before move day. They don't just give you a quote over the phone or online. So the next time they were in Calgary, they came by to see the tiny house, and so that they could give me a quote on the move. And so the first thing you want to do is book your mover and get us for roughly when you're going to move. If you know exactly when you're going to move, great. I didn't know exactly when I was going to be able to move, because the spot I had found, the first spot here on the island, when I made the arrangements with my landlords, the pad wasn't built yet. They were still needed to clear trees, they needed to build the pad, all of those things. So I wasn't quite sure when it would be ready. Would it be August? Would it be September? Turned out that it was in September, and I moved September 21st, 2022. So that's the first thing you want to do. Get your mover booked for the date that you want to move, because without them, nothing's going to happen. So that's number one. Number two is get your mail forwarded. When I was moving to the island, the nearest town, I wanted a post office box, because the place I was moving didn't have its own address. I was on somebody's property, and I don't get a whole lot of paper mail, but I also wanted a place where I could have packages sent, Amazon packages and things like that. I prefer a mailbox for that. So the nearest little town to that spot was Chemainus, British Columbia, adorable little town. And I called them ahead of time to see if I could get a post office box. And you can't do that remotely because you need to sign and such. So I was coming out to the island, I was flying out to the island to meet my landlords in person and see the spot in person, which is another thing I recommend you do. While I was here, I made sure to stop into the post office in Chemainus so I could sign the paperwork, get the keys to the mailbox, and get my mail forwarded. And I think it's important to get your mail forwarded at least a few weeks, if not a month, before you're moving, because things will be in transit. I mean, I suppose if you get a lot of paper mail, then you might want to wait and have it done maybe the week before. So that's number two. Number three, you got to sort out your insurance. So I've had some questions about tiny house insurance, and it's really hard for me to make a video about tiny house insurance because I don't know where you live. I don't know what country you live in. I don't know what province or state you live in. I don't know what municipality you live in. I don't know what kind of house you have. So a tiny house on wheels is on a trailer. It's on wheels, and that trailer will have a VIN number, a vehicle identification number, just like your car. And so it needs to be registered as something. And you can register it as a mobile home, you can register it as a park model RV or an actual RV. My tiny house is registered as a park model. And when I called around for insurance for it in Calgary, I found Intact Insurance in Canada, in Alberta, would insure it. They would insure it as a mobile home. And so that's what I was insured in. I'm still insured with them, and it's still insured as a mobile home. And in order for it to be insured as a mobile home, the tires had to come off of the axles. The axles are still there, but the tires needed to be off, and the house needed to be skirted in, just like any mobile home. And I had to send them pictures of that. I called them because I wanted to make sure that the house could still be insured with them here in BC, and if not, then I had to find an insurer that would. And also I wanted insurance for the transport, the transit between Calgary and the spot on Vancouver Island. So going with a professional mover, the mover has insurance, and that's another thing to check, right? To be sure of, so that if something happened, the tiny house was insured through their insurance. But because I always like to be extra careful and super prepared, I wanted also to have coverage on my own. I arranged for insurance for transport. So it was insured as a mobile home until the day it moved off that site. Then it was insured in transit for the move. And then once it got to its new site, it was insured as a mobile home there. And it is here as well. So it's really important because, you know, things happen, right? Accidents happen. And you just want your own coverage. Make sure your mover has coverage. That's really important. But also just be sure by having your own. It wasn't expensive. I think it was under about $150. And yes, that's a lot of money. However, for peace of mind, not so much. So make sure that you've got your insurance sorted out. And if you're looking for a tiny house insurance, you'll have to talk to each insurance agency and just tell them what you've got, how your house is registered. I mean, RVs are insured, and mobile homes are insured, and part models are insured, you should be able to find a company that insures that, right? You just need to ask around. If you're not sure, then go to RV dealerships and ask them if they have any recommendations, right? Or tiny house builders. If you're having your house built by a tiny house, a professional builder, they will probably have recommendations. So that is number 3, insurance. All right, so number 4 was, because I was following, I'm not pulling the tiny house, my mover is, A&N Transport is, but I'm following the tiny house in the van, and I was pulling a U-Haul trailer behind the van because I needed to also get over from Calgary to the island all of the blocking for the tiny house, all of the skirting and the framing for the skirting, the panels for the shed, my bike, and my, outdoor furniture and things like that. They all had to come. I wasn't bringing my front step. That stayed, but I needed all of that stuff to come. And so I wanted to pull that in a U-Haul trailer. But I didn't have a hitch on the van. So the next thing on my list is the Hitch shop in Calgary. I contacted them to get a hitch put on, installed on the van so that I could pull this U-Haul trailer. And I talked to U-Haul to see what size trailers they had. I ended up getting a slightly bigger one. The one that I had booked wasn't there when I went to pick it up, which happens, right? People keep their trailers longer than they're supposed to, and so they never give you anything smaller, but they'll give you something bigger. I ended up with one that was a couple feet longer, which actually turned out to be a good thing because it was packed. But you need to know what size ball you need for that hitch. So if you've got to do something like that, to make the arrangements well in advance, because you need to be able to get your vehicle in to get the hitch installed. A spare tire on the ProMaster is underneath at the back, so the hitch that I've got has bars. The bar goes around where the tire is to mount to the frame, so that the tire can still be dropped if it's needed. So really important that they have time to do the work. And you also need to know what size ball you need in order to pull that trailer, because there are different size balls that go on the hitches with the pin, the cotter's pin, and so you need to have all of that in advance. I just tested to make sure the mic was working. I don't want to film this sucker again. All right, so where were we? If you have a pet, you need to decide how you're going to manage the pet for the trip. So obviously, Sophie was going to come with me in the van. Well, she does not like traveling in vehicles at all. If she's in a carrier, she'll pee in it. She just sheds like crazy. She yowls the whole time. She gets very stressed out. And while my youngest Shiloh was coming with me for the trip over and stayed a couple weeks once we got to the island, their job was to make sure, take care of Sophie, keep her out from underneath my feet, because that's where she kept wanting to be, and just sort of keep her calm. I wanted to find another way to minimize her stress, reduce her stress. So I started researching CBD oil for pets. It's a thing, and vets will recommend it. And I found a pet store in Calgary that sold it, and it was mixed with salmon oil. And keep in mind, this CBD oil has no THC. It's not getting your kitty high or anything like that, but it's supposed to calm them. So I found that and had that ready, and we, tested it on her. She ended up not really liking it, and we only used it the first day and the first night. But it was just one way to take care of her for the trip. We were worried about her because it was going to be a 2-day trip, right? We pulled out, I think, on a Wednesday, and we were going to spend Wednesday night just outside of Vancouver. We pulled out very early morning on Wednesday, and then take the ferry over the next day on the Thursday and arrive at our new spot Thursday midday. So, that's pretty stressful. And she was very stressed. She spent most of her time on Shiloh's lap, but she was very stressed. She wouldn't drink for hours, which really worried me. But she eventually, towards the end of the day, she started drinking. and she calmed down a bit. And I think having Shiloh there was really useful, having somebody there to sort of comfort her, somebody that she loves. So that was really good. So if you've got pets, you're going to need to think of how you're going to transport them if you're going a long distance. Dogs are probably a lot easier because most dogs are used to being in vehicles. A lot of cats don't like vehicles. And Sophie hates them. She is not an adventure kitty, a drive in the car or the van kind of cat. So for those of you asking, I don't take her camping. She's not happy. She prefers to stay home. That's number 5 on my list of things that I had to take care of, was Sophie and getting the CBD oil for her. All right, so what was next on here? Okay, handyman. So in Calgary, I have a fantastic handyman named Steph. He was the fellow who built my front step there. He built he put in on my skirting. He's the one who built the shed for me in the panels that could be disassembled. Awesome fellow. And he was so much help getting the house ready to go for the move. What I wanted was somebody here on the ground. When we pulled into that spot, I wanted to have a handy person, somebody here to help. Because it was just me, right? Me and Shiloh. Once the house is set and dropped, Andrew's off, I wanted to have a handy person here on the island ready to go. And so I got a recommendation from my landlords and ended up hiring that person. And he's the one who built my front step. He leveled the house and blocked it up and built my front step. He ended up not being the person who built the skirting and put up the shed and everything for me. That fellow's name was Joe Horvath, who was amazing. And he ended up also Joe was a huge help for me getting the house ready to move from its first spot to this spot. But I recommend having somebody, especially if you're a single person, because you just need somebody. You need somebody who knows what they're doing, and you can just ask to do stuff. You know, it was stressful. It was a long day. I just wanted to know that I had somebody there that I was paying so that I could ask them to do stuff. And that was really useful for me. So it's a recommendation. You don't have to, it might not be something you need, but for me, I really needed that. So number 7 is figure out your gas situation, your fuel situation. In Calgary, I was at the mobile home park. I was on natural gas, city gas. But on the island, I was going to be on propane. Now, there's only 2 appliances in the house that run on either natural gas or propane, and they can run on each one. Either one is my stove and my furnace. I have a 40,000 BTU Dometic RV furnace in the tiny house. So I needed to arrange to have a propane tank delivered, and I also needed to arrange to have a gas fitter come out and do the conversion on the appliances and get everything connected, pull the permit, all of those things. And so that's something you want to think about ahead of time. If you're not staying on the same gas system. Even in Calgary, when the tiny house came, ATCO, the gas company, had to come out and do the connection. So you're going to need to, one way or another, you're going to need to source that out, sort it out, schedule it, and get it all figured out. And so that's definitely an important thing. The number 8 on the list is getting your electrical sorted out. So the house is built to run on a 50 amp service. And in Calgary, and it came with a cord. I think the cord was probably 8 feet long, 10 feet long that it came with. It's these big, thick electrical cords that are meant for this sort of thing. Well, in my new spot, where the power box, the power is coming into the site and the main box was at the front of the yard by the driveway. But the business side of the house, all the services are on the back side here of the tiny house. And so the distance was going to be way too long. I needed an extension cord or a longer cord for that. So I called around to RV shops, and I found one that had a 30-foot cord, but I thought I was going to need longer. So I ended up ordering a 50 amp cord from Amazon. And I'm glad I ordered it early because it took a lot longer to come than I expected. It arrived a week and a half before the move, so I was starting to get a little nervous. Turned out that when I got to the site, the orientation of the house, how it was going to be situated on the site, changed once we got there. And we made the decision to turn it in a different direction, which meant that 50 amp cord wasn't going to be long enough. Even at the 50 foot 50 amp cord wasn't going to be long enough. And so I contacted an electrician to come out, and he spliced together the two. He did a connector of the two they connected underneath the house, like in the shed actually, at the front of the house. And we dug a little trench between that underneath the shed and underneath the driveway to the power pole, and then just covered that up so that we weren't driving over the cord. And that was really important. So just figure out how long your cord is and where your electric box is, all of that stuff, because if you need to order one, it may take a while for you to get it, and you want to make sure you have it when you get to the new site. All right, so number 9, we've talked about gas. You're now going to need to get your services switched over. In Calgary, I was with NMAX for my electrical. In BC, it's BC Hydro, and so I needed to get my power switched off in Calgary and arrange to have it switched on at the power pole at the main box on the island. And so I did that ahead of time, and by just making phone calls, that sort of thing. But it's really important, because even though I didn't have power to the house that first night, I could run an extension cord from that main box into the house, so I could run a few things in here, because you need to stop your billing as well, right? So I had NMAX stop service midnight of the day that I moved, even though I moved out in the morning, just in case things took longer or something happened. And so my billing cutoff date was then, and I had the electrical turned on the island the next morning, even though I wasn't going to get there until mid-afternoon. So you just want to make sure you've got that sorted out. You also want to sort out your internet, your cable TV if you've got it, that sort of stuff. I was with Shaw in Calgary, and I could continue to be with Shaw on the island. The fellow on the phone was incredibly helpful. He even made the arrangements, the appointment for the tech to come out. We got onto the island on Thursday, and he came Friday, because we didn't know what time we'd be here on Thursday. So we didn't have internet for one day. Big deal. Had cell service. That was fine. And so the next day, the Shaw guy was there to connect, get everything live, and get the house with internet. I don't have cable, so that wasn't a worry. You don't want to wait till you get to your new spot and then call, because it could be a couple of days before that tech can come out to do that. You want to be thinking about all of your utilities and getting those sorted out and scheduled before you move. Your toilet situation. Speaking of utilities, your toilet situation. So in Calgary, I was on sewer. So I had a flushing toilet in the house when I had it built. I had ordered my toilet. I wanted to get a second urine jug for it, so I wanted to get all of that ordered ahead of time. But you need to think about where you're going, and if there's anything like that you need to sort out, you need to order that well in advance. So that was something that was on my list as well. Because I was going from mainland to the island, we had a ferry that we had to schedule. And now the mover was booking the ferry for himself and the tiny house, right? That was one unit, and that was one of the things he did. But I wanted to be on the same boat, right? And because the van with that U-Haul trailer behind it was about 36 feet, 35, 36 feet, is a big unit. And so I didn't want to take any chances, and I made sure that I scheduled, reserved a spot on the same sailing as the mover had, so that I could be on the same boat. And that's really important, right? If there's anything like that you need to coordinate, you want to do that as early as you can, so that it's just set. Okay, and then finally, your doctor. I made sure that I made an appointment with my dentist to get a cleaning, and then my doctor to get my prescription refilled and to have a physical, and just all of those things. I think it's important to take care of any of those types of appointments, get them done well in advance, get your prescriptions so that you have them and you're not thinking about worrying about any of those things. This little notebook went everywhere with me for that month or two before and even after. And it's invaluable because now I look at it and I know exactly what I need to do. When I move from that first spot to this spot, I just followed the same steps, right? I didn't have to do every single thing. I didn't have to book a ferry, but it was right from calling the mover to getting the propane tank delivered, the old one picked up and taken back, and the new one delivered, all of those things. And there's probably things on my list that wouldn't be on your list, and there's probably things that'll be on your list that weren't on my list. And I thought that maybe that would be helpful to some of you out there who are getting your houses ready to move. Next video will be the actual physical things that I had to do to get the house ready for moving. And I have a whole video, I have multiple videos on getting the house ready to move, and then the move day itself, and then getting the house set up. But there's just certain things to think about and to prepare for, and that you don't want to forget. So I will do that video next because, again, I think it might be helpful for some of you. So thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody you think might like it. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It really helps the channel out and doesn't cost you anything. If you think you're subscribed, check to make sure you still are, because YouTube is doing some shenanigans and people are getting unsubscribed for some reason from channels that they're subscribed to. Don't know why. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, including to yourself. I love you, and I'll see you next time.